Architects of Destruction products in this video are prototype parts from their Rampage dungeon Kickstarter. The link for that will be below, and it will be updated when it's available in their store. The tiles utilize the open lock system, which uses clips to hold the tiles together. The pieces are very sturdy once attached to each other, and also easy to pull apart when needed. The tiles were all primed with Army Painter Black Primer. We're going to start this out using Army Painter Dungeon Gray. On the walls, I kind of fog the gray in, not to full opacity, and then I pick certain bricks to kind of go heavy on. Now we use a mixture of Dungeon Gray and Elf Green and just try to pick random spots to give color variation in the stone. Now you see we use oak brown to start our first shadows, and for the floor tiles we're just gonna concentrate on the seams between each of the squares. And to speed up this process, you can kind of lay all the tiles out and hit them all at once. I spilled some paint on one of the tiles and I wiped it off, and I kind of liked the look of it, so I decided to do it to the rest of the tiles. On the walls, I just picked certain lines to follow, and then some of the bricks that are recessed I decided to shade under there, and then also holding the wall and kind of shooting the airbrush paint up from the bottom so it gets the bottom of some of those bricks that are sticking out. For the wooden pillars, we're just going to base them with leather brown first. For the first highlight on the columns, we're going to use a 1-to-1 mixture of arid earth and leather brown, and we're going to concentrate this on the upper 1/3 of the pillars. Save this mix because we're going to need it later. And now we're going to use the Army Painter Dark Tone Quick Shade and concentrate that on the lower third of the pillars. Now we're going to take some of that arid earth and leather brown that we saved and hit the tops of the pillars with that. So now we're going to use some color modulation technique and basically exaggerate the shape of these tiles. Pick any corner, and whatever corner you choose to highlight, you're going to do it 1/3 of that tile and do the same thing on every tile that you decide to modulate. Now we're going to take Army Painter Dark Tone and do the same thing. Kind of like what we practiced on the pillars. We're going to pick the opposite corner that you did the highlight on and hit that other corner, 1/3 of the tile, with the shadow color. And repeat it on every tile, same corner. I was planning on doing all the tiles, but I kind of like the stripe of modulated tiles down the middle. Now we're going to dry brush with arid earth. So just grab a big old fat brush, dip it in the arid earth, and wipe pretty much most of the paint off and go over all the tiles. And for the walls, you want to bring the brush from the top to the bottom. It doesn't really matter too much on the floor tiles, but the walls, it kind of makes a difference. Next, we use plate mail metal to base the gates with. Then we use a wash of quick shade dark tone to kind of bring the details out of that gate. And this is what we got so far. So I'm just taking an overall look at it, seeing what I might have missed, and going on to the next step, which would be the metal bits on the pillars. And for those, we're going to base coat them with gunmetal. Now we're going to apply gloss varnish to protect our work and also to break surface tension for when we apply the washes in the next step. So once the gloss varnish is dry, we're going to use some Winsor Newton Lamp Black and Van Dyke Brown oil paints thinned with mineral spirits, and basically just treat it like you would a water-based wash if you thinned it with water. I like the color to be a little bit darker because we're going to remove a bunch of it off of the surface later, and it'll keep the recesses dark. I chose an oil-based wash because I want to cover a huge area and not have to worry about the wash pulling up and drying in a weird area and being permanent once it's dried. Oil wash gives you the flexibility that you can come back and wipe it off and not have to agitate it too much in order to get it off, whereas a water-based wash, once it's dry, you're kind of set up with wherever it dried at. So I let that wash dry overnight, and now I'm taking a cotton ball dipped in mineral spirits and I squeeze most of it out just so the cotton ball is damp, and I'm just agitating the surfaces. And you can pretty much just go over everything with it until it looks how you like. So now we're going to matte varnish it, and the most important part is during the cleanup process you might have had mineral spirits pool into cracks and crevices that maybe you can't see, and even if you blow dried it to speed up the drying process and evaporation of the mineral spirits, there can still be some of it hiding. So you want to make sure it's completely dry before you matte varnish it, or else you could get like hazing and weird stuff going on. And when the matte varnish is dry, this is what we got. And that's also the stopping point if you plan on taking this dungeon apart and using it in other builds. However, the next stuff is if you're doing a permanent room that you don't plan on taking apart, you're going to keep it all glued together. The matte varnish did two things. It sealed in the oils, which is a step that you want to do, and it'll make the oil wash permanent and you're ready to play after that. And it's also a great base for dry pigments because it's rough and the pigments will settle into that, and even if you wipe them away, they're gonna look pretty good. But this effect doesn't work if you plan on taking the tiles apart, because all these effects are gonna get broken once you take it all apart. And this is after another coat of matte varnish is put on to lock the pigments into place. It's very subtle when you look at it like this, but again, if you break the tiles apart, the effect kind of gets broken. Same with the rust that we add inside the dungeon. You can do this on the pillars, no problem. It'll work great whether you break it apart or not. What isn't shown here but is shown in the final pictures is I also use this pigment on the inside of the dungeon and on the gates themselves and kind of around the base of where the gates sit. So again, that's a permanent dungeon space kind of effect that you want to reserve for those rooms. I hope you guys liked the tutorial, and I can't wait to do the next one. Check the links below where you can get this product. Thanks.